Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, I'm just going to take a brief call on this report from the Privileges Committee looking at the agreements for policing, execution of search warrants and collection and retention of information by the NZSIS. Comments made already by the Attorney-General Chris Finlayson and my colleague David Parker and Kennedy Graham cover most of the material that the report has. What I wanted to talk about were two things. The first is a very specific matter which, when I came onto the Privileges Committee, I was concerned about in this area, and that is when search warrants are executed, this is not just for Parliament but more generally, nowadays with the growth of the use of electronic information storage, it is the practice of agencies to seize hard drives, to seize the entire hard drive of a person who's involved in an investigation in order to get the particular documents or the particular information that is desired. When a Member of Parliament is in that situation, there may well be material on that hard drive that is quite separate from what is being sought, that actually could be captured and taken away from a Member of Parliament in such a way as to compromise both parliamentary privilege and the general operation of our work as parliamentarians. And so I applaud the recommendation that is in this report that actually, and this is the chaperoning concept that the Attorney-General mentioned earlier, where an IT specialist will assist in the execution of the warrants to ensure that our rights as parliamentarians are upheld and that parliamentary privilege is protected within that. I think that's a small but very important advance for us to ensure that we don't, as parliamentarians, hand over material that is ultimately privileged and ultimately shouldn't be part of those investigations. The other point that I particularly wanted to make was around the question of the NZSIS and its role with Parliament. And I appreciate the fact that this report is in fact following on from an interim report of the committee in this area and following on from protocols that were signed off several years ago. By Margaret Wilson, that's right, Margaret Wilson as Speaker, several years ago. And there is a fundamental principle that I think needs to be reiterated here, and that is that the SIS is not, under normal circumstances, going to be collecting information about a sitting Member of Parliament. As the Attorney-General said, once someone becomes a sitting Member of Parliament, their file is closed immediately. And I think that is very, very important that we make sure that is on the record of the House as the fundamental underlying principle here. What can happen is that for reasons of national security, there may be on occasion situations in which the SIS may want to be looking at the activities of a Member of Parliament. The threshold for doing so must be very high, because we as parliamentarians need to be able to go about our business unencumbered by the activities of state agencies with significant powers. And it is on that point that I want to raise my concerns. And that is that a review of the Security Intelligence Service was planned and was never completed. And in the maelstrom of all of the concerns about the GCSB and Kim.com and the appointment of Ian Fletcher, that review of the SIS was quietly shelved by John Key. And I believe, Mr Speaker, it is essential that that review is done. Now, the Labor Party's policy is that we need a review of both the Security Intelligence Service and the GCSB, and in fact all of the agencies involved in our security intelligence system, which also now includes particularly Ofcans as part of the police. In the absence of that review, public trust and confidence in our security intelligence agencies has reached an all-time low in New Zealand. And for my part, Mr Speaker, I am deeply distressed by that. I am a person who believes that it is important that we get the balance between security and privacy in our society right. And in the modern era, that is even more important. I understand why, and the Labor Party understands why we have these agencies working for us. There are reasons, there are people in the world today from whom New Zealand needs to be protected. But equally, our privacy and our rights as citizens must not be compromised by that. And our privacy and our rights as members of Parliament representing citizens must not be compromised by that. At the moment, legislatively for the GCSB, we now have, in my view, legislation that goes far too far in terms of that balance, and we have lost that balance between security and privacy. And that's right, as my colleague David Parker says, the absence of the requirement for a warrant, the fact we have to essentially rely on the assurance of the Prime Minister about how these investigations will be operationalised is ridiculous and is in fact an insult to this Parliament. The SIS sits alongside that, Mr Speaker, operating in operations within New Zealand without the review and that was meant to take place. We need that review to happen to restore trust and confidence. And in fact, for this report to have my full and complete confidence, we need to know that review is going to happen. And it's noted in the report that the issues that Kennedy Graham has been discussing in his contribution need to be considered whenever the legislation governing the SIS is reviewed. Well, Mr Speaker, my view is that it urgently needs to be reviewed. Having said that, the situation we find ourselves in today is that the Speaker is the person who acts on behalf of this Parliament in dealing with these agencies. We must have confidence that the Speaker will act in a way that upholds all members of Parliament's rights, no matter what party they come from. It is also true to say that under the SIS Act as it stands, the Director of Security does need to consult with the Leader of the Opposition from time to time. Without going into any detail about those matters, Mr Speaker, I think they would tend to be at the more general level, not at the specific level of what might be happening with a particular member of Parliament. And so therefore the Speaker's responsibility here is extremely high. I don't think we are at the end of our discussion about the role of the Speaker, as David Parker has mentioned, or indeed about the relationship between this Parliament and agencies with powers such as the SIS. But this report represents a series of useful changes to the processes that were originally brought forward. From the point of view of the Labour Party, we can support this report, but we welcome the idea of ongoing dialogue about the role of the SIS in relation to Parliament, and we strongly urge and in fact commit to the public of New Zealand that we will do the review of security and intelligence agencies that is needed to restore public trust and confidence in them.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Call now on Government Order of the Day number 8.